The rain battered the windows of our Seattle apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. 7 years ago, I'd looked into Ethan's hazel eyes and promised forever. Now he sat across from me, his voice flat, saying he was tired of us. I walked out into the storm, my heart fracturing with every step, not knowing he'd chase me down before dawn. My name is Caleb Nguyen, 28, a graphic designer with a stubborn streak and a heart that loves too fiercely. Ethan Carter, 29, my partner, is a high school history teacher with a quiet intensity that drew me in from the moment we met at a Capitol Hill coffee shop. His curly blonde hair and easy laugh were my anchor, until tonight, when he unraveled everything. This is the story of how we broke and how we rebuilt, on the jagged edges of love and redemption. It was our 7th anniversary, and I'd spent weeks planning. A homemade faux dinner, a nod to my Vietnamese roots, simmered on the stove, filling our small apartment with warmth. I'd set the table with candles, their flickering light casting shadows on the photos of us. Hiking in Olympic National Park, kissing under the Space Needle, laughing at a pride parade. Ethan came home late, his teacher's satchel slung over his shoulder, his face drawn. "Caleb," he said, not meeting my eyes, "I'm tired. I don't know if I can keep doing this." The words landed like a punch. "This?" I echoed, my voice shaking. "You mean us?" He nodded, his jaw tight, and something in me snapped. I grabbed my jacket, the faux forgotten, and stormed out into the Seattle night. The rain soaked me instantly, but I didn't care. I walked, my sneakers slapping puddles, my mind replaying every moment of our life together. How had we gone from whispering dreams in the dark to this? I ended up at Pike Place Market, deserted at this hour, the neon signs glowing faintly through the downpour. My phone buzzed, Ethan calling, texting, begging me to come back. I ignored it, my pride warring with the ache in my chest. We'd built a life together, weathered his parents' disapproval, my own fears of never being enough. Was it all for nothing? I slumped against a shuttered flower stall, the scent of damp roses mingling with my tears. Hours later, Ethan found me. His coat was drenched, his hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes burned with something I hadn't seen in months: desperation. "Caleb, please," he said, voice breaking. "I'm an idiot. I'm scared. But I love you." I wanted to scream, to push him away, but his trembling hands reached for mine, and I let him pull me close. We stood there, soaked and shivering, as he whispered apologies into my hair. That night, we didn't go home. We checked into a cheap motel, the kind with flickering fluorescent lights and questionable stains. Lying on the lumpy bed, Ethan told me what he'd been hiding. The burnout from teaching, the pressure from his family to settle down with someone else, the fear that he was failing me. I listened, my anger softening into something rawer. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He shook his head, tears falling. "I didn't want to burden you." We talked until dawn, peeling back layers of hurt we'd both ignored. I admitted my own fears of losing him, of not being the partner he deserved. We made a pact. No more hiding, no more running. But promises are fragile, and as we left the motel, hand in hand, I wondered if we could truly mend what had broken. The next week was tentative, like walking on thin ice. Ethan took a leave from teaching, and we drove to the Oregon coast, seeking clarity in the wild expanse of the Pacific. At Cannon Beach, we walked along Haystack Rock, the wind tugging at our jackets. "I want us to start over," Ethan said, his voice steady for the first time in days. "Not new, but better." I nodded, my throat tight, and we kissed, the salt of the ocean mixing with the warmth of his lips. But starting over wasn't simple. Back in Seattle, Ethan's sister, Laura, showed up unannounced, her disapproval of our relationship as sharp as ever. "You're throwing your life away," she told him, her voice dripping with disdain. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter, as Ethan defended us, his voice rising. "Caleb is my life," he said, and for the first time, I believed he meant it. Laura left, her silence louder than words, and Ethan turned to me, his eyes fierce. "I choose you," he said. "Always." We started therapy, a small office in Fremont with a therapist named Dr. Ruiz who didn't flinch at our story. She helped us navigate the guilt, the fear, the love that still burned beneath it all. One session, Ethan admitted he'd been afraid I'd leave first, that I'd find someone less complicated. I laughed, bitter and soft. "You're my complication," I said, and he smiled, the kind that lit up his whole face. By the end of that first month, we were different, not fixed but growing. We cooked together again, danced in our living room to old jazz records, laughed until our sides hurt. But the shadow of that night lingered, a reminder of how close we'd come to losing everything. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but as I looked at Ethan, his head bent over a book, I felt a quiet certainty. We were worth fighting for. The Seattle spring brought cherry blossoms and a fragile hope to our relationship. Ethan and I were trying, but the cracks from our anniversary fight hadn't fully healed. Every touch, every shared glance, felt like a test. Could we trust each other again? I wanted to believe in us, but doubt is a stubborn guest, lingering in the quiet moments. One evening, I found Ethan staring at an old photo of us from our first Pride parade in San Francisco. We'd been 22, fearless, our faces painted with rainbow flags. "Do you miss that version of us?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer right away, the weight of the question pressing down. "I miss how easy it felt," I admitted finally. "But I love who we are now, too. Even the messy parts." That conversation sparked something. Ethan suggested a trip, a real one, to reconnect away from the noise of our daily lives. We chose Big Sur, California, a place neither of us had been, with its rugged cliffs and endless ocean. The drive down was long, filled with playlists we'd made for each other years ago. Ella Fitzgerald, Tegan and Sarah, a random K-pop track I'd added to make him laugh. By the time we reached the coast, the tension between us had softened, replaced by a tentative joy. We checked into a small cabin overlooking the Pacific, its windows framing a view that felt like it could swallow our fears whole. That first night, we sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen. Ethan rested his head on my shoulder, and I felt the weight of his trust, heavy and precious. "I thought I'd lost you," he murmured. I squeezed his hand, my throat tight. "You didn't. You won't." But Big Sur wasn't just a romantic escape. It forced us to confront truths we'd avoided. One afternoon, hiking along the cliffs, Ethan stopped, his face pale. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice unsteady. My stomach dropped, bracing for another blow. He took a breath. "Last year, I got an offer to teach abroad in Japan. I didn't tell you because I was afraid it'd mean leaving you." The revelation stung, not because of the opportunity, but because he'd kept it from me. "Why hide it?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He looked away, the ocean roaring below us. "I didn't want to make you choose between your career here and me. I wanted to be angry, but the vulnerability in his eyes stopped me. Instead, I took his hand. "We decide together," I said firmly. "No more secrets." That night, we made love in the cabin, the kind of intimacy that felt like a promise. Afterward, Lying in the dark, Ethan traced circles on my back. "If we could go anywhere," he whispered, "where would you want to be?" I thought about it, the possibilities stretching out like the horizon. "Anywhere, as long as it's with you," I said, and meant it. Back in Seattle, reality crept in. Ethan's school was facing budget cuts, and his job was on the line. I saw the stress etch lines into his face. The way he'd stay up late grading papers, his shoulders hunched. I tried to help, cooking dinner, leaving notes in his bag. But the distance between us grew again, subtle but sharp. One night, I found him on the couch, staring at his laptop, an email from the Japan program open. "Are you thinking about it?" I asked, my heart racing. He closed the laptop, his eyes tired. "I don't know, Caleb. It's a chance to start fresh, but I don't want to lose us." I sat beside him, the silence heavy. "Then let's figure it out together," I said. We spent hours talking, weighing the pros and cons, our fears and dreams spilling out. By morning, we'd decided to apply as a couple. He'd teach and I'd freelance remotely. It was a risk, but it felt like ours. The application process was grueling, with endless forms and interviews. We leaned on each other, celebrating small victories, a callback, a good reference. Dr. Ruiz, our therapist, helped us navigate the uncertainty, reminding us to communicate, to stay grounded. One session, she asked, "What does home mean to you both?" Ethan looked at me, his eyes soft. "Home is Caleb," he said simply. I felt tears prick my eyes, the truth of it anchoring me. As spring turned to summer, we waited for news, our lives on hold. We took walks through Volunteer Park, holding hands under the cherry blossoms, their petals falling like soft promises. Ethan started smiling more, his laugh returning, and I felt the pieces of us clicking back into place. But I knew the journey wasn't over. Love, I was learning, was a choice we'd have to make every day. The email came on a humid July morning, the kind where Seattle felt like it was holding its breath. Ethan and I were accepted to the Japan program. He'd teach and I'd work remotely, our new chapter waiting across the Pacific. But as we celebrated with cheap champagne in our apartment, a new fear settled in. Could we really uproot our lives and still hold on to each other? Packing was chaos. Our tiny apartment became a maze of boxes, each one a memory. Ticket stubs from our first concert, a chipped mug from a road trip to Portland. Ethan kept pausing, holding things up like relics. "Remember this?" he'd say, his voice catching. I'd nod, my heart aching with the weight of leaving. Seattle had been our home, the backdrop of our love, our fights, our growth. Now we were trading it for the unknown. We flew out in August, landing in Tokyo under a sky heavy with monsoon clouds. The city was a sensory overload, neon signs, crowded streets, the hum of a language we barely understood. Our apartment in Shinjuku was half the size of our Seattle place, with paper-thin walls and a view of a narrow alley. Ethan loved it, his eyes bright with adventure. I felt unmoored, my sketches for freelance clients suffering as I struggled to adjust. One night, jet-lagged and restless, I snapped at Ethan over something trivial. Dishes, maybe, or the way he left his shoes by the door. "You're not even trying to make this work," I said, my voice sharp. He flinched, his face falling. "I'm trying, Caleb. I'm trying for us." The words hung between us, and I saw the exhaustion in his eyes, the same kind I'd seen on our anniversary. I apologized, pulling him into a hug, but the tension lingered. We found a rhythm, slowly. Ethan thrived at his school, his students' enthusiasm for history reigniting his passion. I joined a local art collective, my designs gaining traction with Japanese clients. We explored Tokyo together, temples in Asakusa, ramen shops in Shibuya, quiet moments in Yoyogi Park. But the distance between us wasn't just physical. Ethan was hiding something again, his smiles too quick, his silences too long. It came to a head during a weekend trip to Kyoto. In a temple garden, surrounded by crimson maples, Ethan broke down. "I got a call from my mom," he said, his voice shaking. "She's sick cancer. She wants me to come back." My heart sank. His family had never accepted me, but I knew how much they meant to him. "What do you want to do?" I asked, bracing myself. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "I don't know. I can't lose her, but I can't lose you either." I pulled him close, the garden blurring around us. "We'll figure it out," I said, echoing the promise we'd made in Big Sur. But inside I was terrified. Would love be enough to bridge this gap? We flew back to Seattle for a month, staying in a friend's guest room. Ethan's mom, Diane, was frail but sharp-tongued, her disapproval of me unchanged. At the hospital, she barely acknowledged me, her focus on Ethan. I swallowed my hurt, focusing on supporting him, cooking meals, driving him to appointments, holding him when he cried. One night, Diane called me to her bedside. "You make him happy," she said gruffly, her eyes avoiding mine. "Don't let him forget that." It wasn't acceptance, but it was something. Back in Japan, we were different, stronger somehow. Ethan started opening up about his fears, his guilt over his family. I shared my own struggles, feeling like an outsider in Tokyo, worrying I wasn't enough for him. We leaned on Dr. Ruiz via video calls, her calm voice guiding us through. "Love isn't perfect," she said. "It's choosing each other every day." We took her words to heart, building new routines. Morning coffee in our tiny kitchen, late-night walks through Shinjuku's neon glow. By winter, Tokyo felt like home. We celebrated our 8th anniversary in a small izakaya, toasting with sake and promises. Ethan raised his glass, his eyes shining. "To us," he said. "To fighting, to breaking, to rebuilding." I clinked my glass against his, my heart full. We weren't perfect, but we were real, and that was enough. Tokyo's cherry blossom season arrived, painting the city in soft pinks and whites. Ethan and I walked hand in hand through Ueno Park, petals drifting around us like snow. We'd survived a year of upheaval. His mother's illness, our move across the world, the constant push and pull of our love. But beneath the beauty, new challenges loomed, testing the promises we'd made. Ethan's school offered him a permanent position, a chance to stay in Japan long-term. It was a dream for him, but my freelance work was faltering. Clients were dropping off, and I missed the creative community I'd had in Seattle. "What if I can't make it work here?" I asked one night, my voice small. Ethan pulled me close, his warmth steadying me. "Then we'll find a way," he said. "Together." But together felt harder than ever. Ethan was thriving, his students adoring him, while I felt like I was fading into the background. I started spending more time at the art collective, sketching late into the night. One evening, I met Hiroshi, a Japanese artist in his 30s, whose bold designs and easy confidence drew me in. He offered to collaborate, and I said yes, craving a spark of inspiration. We worked together for weeks, our late-night sessions filled with laughter and ideas. I told myself it was professional, but the guilt gnawed at me. Hiroshi's lingering glances, the way I looked forward to our meetings. Ethan noticed. "You're different," he said one morning, his voice tight. "Is it someone else?" My heart stopped. I hadn't crossed any lines, but the truth was, I'd let Hiroshi fill a void I hadn't admitted to Ethan. "No," I said too quickly. It's just work. He nodded, but the doubt in his eyes cut deeper than any argument. I ended the collaboration with Hiroshi, explaining I needed to focus on my relationship. He understood, his smile kind but sad. You love him, he said simply. I nodded, the truth of it grounding me. I went home and told Ethan everything, not just about Hiroshi, but my fears of losing myself in Japan, of not being enough for him. He listened, his face unreadable, then pulled me into his arms. I don't want you to lose yourself, he said. I want all of you, even the parts that scare you. We started rebuilding again, this time with brutal honesty. I took a part-time teaching job at a local art school, finding purpose in mentoring students. Ethan cut back his hours, making time for us to explore Japan together, hot springs in Hakone, festivals in Osaka. We laughed more, fought less, and slowly, the trust we'd lost began to return. But life had one more test. Ethan's mom's cancer returned, and we flew back to Seattle for her final weeks. Diane was weaker this time, but softer, too. One evening, she took my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. Thank you, she whispered, for loving my son. I cried, the weight of her words lifting years of rejection. When she passed, Ethan and I held each other through the grief, our love a quiet anchor in the storm. Back in Tokyo, we settled into a new normal. I found a gallery to showcase my work, and Ethan started writing a book about his teaching experiences. We hosted dinners for new friends, our tiny apartment filled with laughter and warmth. One night, under a full moon, Ethan took my hand. I want to marry you, he said, his voice steady. My breath caught, the weight of the past year flashing through my mind. Yes, I said, and we kissed, the city humming around us. 2 years after that rain-soaked night in Seattle, Ethan and I stood on a cliff in Big Sur, the same spot from our earlier trip, now planning our wedding. The Pacific roared below, the sunset painting the sky in hues of gold and violet. We'd come full circle, our love tested by distance, doubt, and loss, but stronger for it. This was our story. Not a fairy tale, but a real, messy, beautiful fight for each other. Planning a wedding in Japan was a whirlwind. We chose a small ceremony in a Tokyo garden, cherry blossoms as our witnesses. Our friends from Seattle flew in, their presence a reminder of the life we'd built together. My parents, once hesitant about my sexuality, stood beside me, their pride a quiet gift. Ethan's sister, Laura, came too, her attitude softened by time and Diane's final words. You two are good together, she admitted, her voice gruff but sincere. The ceremony was simple, intimate. Ethan wore a navy suit, his blonde curls tamed for once, and I chose a tailored jacket with a nod to Vietnamese embroidery. We exchanged vows we'd written ourselves, promising to choose each other through every storm. When Ethan said, "I'll never get tired of you," his voice broke, and I felt the echo of our anniversary fight fade into memory. We kissed, the crowd cheering, and for the first time I felt truly whole. After the wedding, we stayed in Japan, building a life that felt like ours. I opened a small art studio, teaching and creating, while Ethan's book became a quiet success, inspiring teachers worldwide. We traveled when we could, Vietnam to visit my extended family, Europe for a belated honeymoon. Each trip, each quiet moment in our apartment, was a reminder of what we'd fought for. Looking back, that night in Seattle wasn't the end, but a beginning. It taught us that love isn't a straight line. It's a choice, a struggle, a promise renewed daily. Ethan and I weren't perfect, but we were committed. Our scars a map of the journey we'd taken together. As we stood on that big Sir Cliff, now husbands, I knew we'd face more challenges, but we'd face them side by side. Our story didn't end with a happily ever after. It continued, with every laugh, every tear, every moment we chose each other. And that, I realized, was the true meaning of love. Not perfection, but persistence, not certainty, but courage. Ethan took my hand, his ring catching the light, and we walked into the future, together.